2020 has been a really terrible year for freedom, let's be honest about that. I mean, most obviously there's been the lockdown where the government responded to a novel virus by essentially putting us all under house arrest and taking away virtually all of our civil liberties. There was also an explosion in cancel culture, where cancel culture has obviously been around for a long time, but this year it really went off the rails and people were cancelled for criticizing transgenderism or making offensive jokes. And then there was a kind of broader culture of conformism, a kind of extraordinary pressure on people to conform to what is considered to be the right way of thinking. And that was most clear in relation to Black Lives Matter, where there was pressure on people to actually bow down, take the knee to Black Lives Matter and to the new ideology that it represents. So you had all these various assaults on freedom, legal, social, conformist, all these kind of different pressures on people to submit to what is considered to be the right way of living and to really give up fundamental freedoms. And I think what I want to draw together is just the way in which the impact that these three different things had on freedom itself, because I think there's a far bigger problem than the fact that certain freedoms have been taken away from us this year. That is undoubtedly true. And it's undoubtedly the case that we need to argue to get those freedoms back. The right to protest, the freedom of association, the right to say what we want to say, freedom of speech. All these freedoms do need to be recovered. And that's going to be one of the huge tasks of 2021. But I think the problem that we have faced this year is far larger than that, because it's not simply that certain freedoms have been taken away, but rather that the foundation of freedom, that the actual foundation stone of freedom has been undermined to an extraordinary degree. And that foundation stone, in my view, is the individual and the individual's capacity to think for himself, to judge for himself, and to decide for himself what is right and proportionate in his own life. And that's really what has been called into question this year. The lockdown called it into question by essentially forcing us to suspend our own individual judgment, our own ability to decide for ourselves what level of risk we're willing to live with and how we think we should deal with a crisis like COVID-19. So it really, the lockdown put enormous pressure on us to suspend our capacity to think for ourselves and decide for ourselves. Cancel culture hangs like a threat over every individual and really pressures them to at least hide away their own thoughts, to suppress their own ideas and to submit to a broader culture of supposedly correct thinking. So the way in which these various assaults on freedom this year have actually ripped apart the foundations of freedom, I think that's the thing we really need to get to grip with, and that's the thing we need to understand. So going ahead, not only do we need to get on the streets and argue for the return of the right to protest, the return of the right to leave our homes when we want to, the return of those fundamental everyday freedoms, we also need to argue for, I think, nothing less than the restoration of the ideal of self-government and the restoration of the ideal that the individual knows best for him or herself how to live. And even when they don't know best, it is still better that they decide and that they make the judgments, because it's only by exercising those moral choices that we can become free people. So we have our work cut out for us in 2021. We need to restore the foundations of freedom, which is the individual, the autonomous, conscious, sensible individual, and his right to live as he sees fit.